Today we have as our speaker David Hilbert. He's going to talk to us about the evolution of gaming in Hancock County and the magical first decade of world-class entertainment at Casino Magic.
How did all this start? When I was at LSU, I got a summer job as a security guard at the Superdome, and that turned into a full-time job when I was going to LSU. I really got the bug on working huge events. I was there during the Rolling Stones and Super Bowls and all the fun stuff. When I got out of LSU, I took a job at the Coliseum in Biloxi in 1988. And as an event coordinator. And back then, that was a place to be. There was no casino. But I came to notice that everything on Highway 90 on the coast was going under. Everything that was boarded up, all the hotels were going away. A lot of the family attractions went away. I met an old timer at the Sun Herald newspaper and said, "Hey, what happened here?" He said, I-10. When I-10 opened up, Highway 90 became Route 66, just like we had the old C-cell shops on Highway 90 in the Bay and all that kind of stuff. And so a lot of the leaders in Biloxi were trying to figure out what are we going to do to revive this place. And several of them came up with the idea, well, let's try to get casinos on the Mississippi Gulf Coast like they used to have, which weren't legal. And so the Coliseum had a petition in the lobby, and that was, I guess they contacted Jackson, how do we get casinos, how do we go about it? So first off, see if these citizens want it. So we had a petition book to see how many people they would have to sign it. And it was interesting, the amount of characters coming out of our lobby from the Lots and the Galots and the Outlaws from Biloxi, Dixon Mafia guys, and Pete Hutt was the mayor at the time. It was just Mayor Mahoney was very involved in trying to get this thing passed. And Hancock County, Harrison County did not pass it the first go round, but Hancock County passed it. And that's when I got the call from some people I used to work with at the Coliseum from Bay St. Louis, said they needed somebody to help with events. And as far as like how things evolved in Hancock County, it wasn't until just a couple years ago, and I heard different stories and all that. I know they had to have a vote passed down here, but 2 years ago, I was going to Williams Pit Barbecue that Phil Williams owned. And I knew Phil Williams because he's a very famous blues singer, and I had a lot of interactions with him over the last 30 years. So I went to place an order in there, and I'm looking on there, Phil Williams right there, smooth Phil Williams. I'm looking at his place right there at Sycamore and Spanish Trail. This is just 2 or 3 years ago. I'm looking on the wall, and there's a picture of Phil Williams and his wife, and a little old man, a little old lady, and Michael Jackson. You can tell the whole picture. Then there was another picture from the same party with the same crew and O.J. Simpson. I was like, Phil, what are these about? He said, well, that guy right there, it's Dan Tyner. He founded Casino Magic. I said, no, he did not. Marlon Torgerson founded Casino Magic. He said, well, not so fast. So here's Marlon right here. This is just a Casino Magic's anniversary last year that we had here in town. And ladies and gentlemen, I have pleased to say have Marlon Torgerson, the founder, right here. Marlon, your head tape. And so I said to Marlon, Marlon, I saw him, Marlon was walking around at Silver Slipper playing slot machines. I said, Marlon, who the heck is Dan Tyner? What? I said, who's Dan Tyner? Where'd you hear that? I said, Phil Williams. He said, well, this is kind of how it all went down. So, and I don't have all the facts and all that. So Marlon, of course, Marlon came from Minnesota where he managed an Indian reservation casino, just like the guy from the Grand did, and it was doing very well. And so Marlon had heard that there was new casinos in South Dakota. And he said, man, that sounds like in the old main streets. That sounds like something that would be interesting to get into, just small little boutique casinos. He asked somebody, how do you get into that? He said, well, go look for this guy, Dan Tyner. He runs the town. Well, can I call him? But we didn't have a phone. Just go down there, and he's walking up out on the sidewalk, black suit, black hat, and a black briefcase. You'll find him. So Marlon said he goes there and finds him. And so Marlon gets a little casino in Deadwood. So fast forward a couple years later, Marlon said Dan Tyner called him and said, hey, Marlon, I got a new deal going down. Think about having a casino on the Gulf Coast 1 hour from 1 million people. I said, where? It's in Mississippi. Marlon said he told Dan Tyner, Mississippi's not on the Gulf of Mexico. He said, you better look at a map. And so sure enough, Marlon came down here, and Dan Tyner, I think Lenny Sawyer had kind of already went ahead and plotted out where the casinos were going to go, and we're looking for partners to come into that. And then Marlon stepped in, of course, the rest is history. Marlon comes into Bay St. Louis. They get the vote passed. And by the way, Phil Williams, when I asked Phil Williams, so why did you get involved in this? He said, well, because they wanted the African-American vote. That's why they involved me, because he was big with St. Louis and Lima. And of course, the vote passed, and the rest is history. So I come down here. Whoop, hold on, get back here a bit. Get ahead of myself. All right, so I had a lot of experience in putting big events together, and my project, Marlon had been contacted about doing USA Network Tuesday night fights, and the promoter was bring Larry Holmes out of retirement, world heavyweight champion Larry Holmes. So we went and got this that white tent right there. That tent sat about 3,000 people, and just started to put everything together, get chairs, whenever we would have one of those events that big, I'd probably have 150 subcontractors to set this entire thing up for 2 hours. And I mean, everybody in the everybody was there. All the car dealers in New Orleans were there. Edwin Edwards was there. The Marcello family was there. The Saints football players were there. Everybody you knew. I remember we had one time when we had all the Saints players there, they introduced some Saints players and said, hey, and from the Atlanta Falcons, Kill Mississippi's own Brett Favre, like 2 people. And who would know 3 years later, what he would come out to. So anyway, we got that all going down, and we wound up doing about, here's probably one of our first fight posters with Larry Holmes, and I think we probably did 10 fights with Larry Holmes over 2 years. But we really, really started, and I tell you, all of our fights on Tuesday night was like a Saturday night. The place was packed. The building was packed. The place was packed. And so we started to draw a lot of attention from a lot of other promoters. And there's me and Larry in the early days. He was a good guy. He was focused, but he was a good guy to deal with, and a fair man, a family man. And we had our own little jackets, Casino Magic Team Boxing, probably the only one that even has one of those left. I got Larry's boxing trunk still with the Casino Magic logo on the bottom of them. I don't know how they wound up not losing those over 30 years. Then we started getting into more and more of these world famous boxers started coming in. Then we started getting into Roberto Duran fights, and he was making a big comeback. Roberto Duran is a household name. Matter of fact, just before we had a hotel, they all used to stay at the Coast Inn, Bill Lady's property there at Highway 90 and 603. And Roberto Duran came with his entire family, and housekeeping opened the door up, and there was feathers all over the place, and they had one of those hot plates on the ground, and they skinned a chicken. They were boiling in the water. They all came. No, but that's the culture they were from. This is one of the big fights we had with Roberto Duran right here. That's at the Montleon. That's me doing the press conference up there. We did his 100th fight. That's how many fights he had. We had a couple more historic fights about him, and then we wound up doing Hector Macho Camacho. Then we got a contact from our first big pay-per-view event. We got a contact from a promoter out of Los Angeles, Rick Hewlett. He's one of the founders of pay-per-view with Don King. And this was one night of fights with 16 world-class boxers, 15 bouts, 4 fights to win, 3 rounds each. It was all in one night. And we're really excited about it. There's our press conference. That's the Rick Hewlett there, the pay-per-view guy. These 2 guys are for Canada. Those are the 2 guys who were the promoters of it. That's in New Orleans at the Hyatt. 2 days before the fight, one of his people come to me and says, hey, we have a problem. I said, what's the problem? Well, the guy that's supposed to put up $1 million in prize money, he doesn't have the money. What? So we all go up to Marlon's office, and we get our security director, Mike Lacey, who's about 6'7", and these guys come walking in, man, they're still 6. So we met with all the boxers and said, hey, listen, there's no $1 million. We never know what's going to guarantee. We never know what's going to happen on pay-per-view. But are you guys willing to fight anyway? And we'll see what happens with pay-per-view. And that's what we wound up doing. Most people never heard this story, but the Historical Society. But that was one of those. Was one of those interesting things that you just never know what's going to happen there. And then probably our biggest fight we ever undertook was a Bob Arum fight with Top Rank Promotions. And we actually did 3 different televised fights in 1 week. We did ESPN, USA Network, and an HBO fight on a Saturday night with Roy Jones Jr. and Oscar De La Hoya, 2 of the biggest boxers that ever were. And we had national media from all over the place. Our boxing commissioner at that time, our state boxing commissioner from Biloxi, Billy Lyons, was a little cantankerous guy. He's no longer with us. And when he went to the weigh-in with Roy Jones, he told Roy Jones, "I don't want any of that jungle dancing in the ring." So that got leaked out to USA Today. The next day, Casino Magic in Mississippi was on the cover of USA Today talking about the boxing minister, being derogatory and racist about jungle bunny dancing. Like, oh my God. But anyway, it was a great week. It was an exhausting week. But I think we probably had 80 members of the media from all over the world surrounding that radio, from Sports Illustrated, ESPN, people to watch Oscar De La Hoya and Roy Jones. And this is what it looked like right there. That's inside that big white tent. That's Oscar De La Hoya right there. Marlon and his family, you can see they're right on that road, the whole family. And I went up on top of a scaffolding and took that photo. And here's another funny story. Before we had our first fight, I said, man, I told our marketing director, we should get a big banner and put it way up on the ceiling behind the ring so that when the TV cameras see it, they're going to go, look, 1-800-5-MAGIC-5. Our first fight we had with Larry Holmes, I ran up, right when it went on TV, live, worldwide. I ran up to the operators and said, what's going on? And they were all, ring, 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 ring. Everybody in the world was calling that number. And they're saying, where is this? Mississippi. Mississippi doesn't have any casinos. Yes, they do. Because Mississippi's not on the Gulf of Mexico. Yes, it is. And I'll tell you, a couple of years later, in this tent, that big white tent, I think it was on a Friday in March of 1993 is when we had the perfect storm that came in through Hancock County and went out to New England. And I remember at about 5 o'clock, we had 100-mile-an-hour gusts coming across the bay. And it shredded that big white tent. Then it snowed, and then it dropped to about 15 degrees. I remember that. So that's when we had the other tent in the parking lot. And fast forward after Katrina, I'm taking my kids trick-or-treating at Spanish Acres right there on Spanish Trail. They used to block it off. We'll go through Spanish Acres with my kids trick-or-treating. It's just a middle-class neighborhood. And I'm walking down, I look at this guy's back, I said, hey, there's my sign! There's my sign! I don't know, I'm sure how to get from there and put it on somebody's fence, but there's my sign. So, on our 1-year anniversary, we did fireworks, and we went and got Chuck Berry. He was 20 grand. He wanted a $10,000 deposit. They wanted the other $10,000 in cash in a paper bag the day of the show. So they said, they said, you have to go get you have to furnish him a 4-piece band. I said, what? He comes by himself. So I went over to Dock of the Bay, where Jerry Fisher had his band, and I knew most of those guys. I said, listen, I need you guys to back somebody up. Oh, not a free gig. I said, we'll pay you. Who am I backing up? I said, you're going to back up Chuck Berry. No way. You're backing up Chuck Berry. That's Darryl Brown and his guys right there. And I got to tell you, Chuck Berry said to me, he said, that's one of the best backup bands I ever had. So the day of the concert, at about 4 o'clock, apparently Chuck Berry flew into New Orleans, rented a Lincoln Town car, and at about 5 o'clock, the night of the show, I get a call from security. Said, hey, Chuck Berry's here to see you. I said, well, is he in the lobby? He said, no, he's parked under that oak tree out by in a car, and he wants his money. So I went by the cage and got the money in the pay. I had the money in the bag. I walk out across the parking lot. There's Chuck, and he's sitting in his front seat, laid back, and he's got a 32-ounce beer in a paper bag. He's drinking it. I said, Mr. Berry, I said, you the money guy? I said, I am. He said, let me look at it. And he looked there, and he thumbs to it. He opens the door, pops a trunk, throws the money in there, grabs his guitar in his case. He said, where's the stage? I said, it's right there. And he rocked out there, and that's him doing the chicken walk right there. I mean, that was an incredible experience. Oh yeah, and then we had Johnny Cash. That's Roseanne right there, and that in that year, we probably did in that tent. We didn't do a lot of huge name entertainment, but we did Johnny Cash, Chris Christopherson, Coaster, Drifters, Platters, all those kind of acts out there, and it was great. And I just this picture went missing from hadn't seen the picture in like 25 years, and I was moving a couple years ago from a house, and I was in a shoebox, and I found that photo. I knew it existed, and I know who this quack is here in the middle. That should have been my spot, but. And then that same guy that brought us those super bikes, the guy didn't show up with money. He said, "Hey, I have another pay-per-view event for you. It was supposed to be in Panama City, but it got canceled due to weather, and it's going to be Robbie Knievel, Evel Knievel's son, jumping off the European champ Eddie Kidd." And they're going to do 3 jumps, and the one with the longest jumps is crowned the world championship. It could be on pay-per-view. Marlon liked the idea, so we went ahead and we did it. And it was quite. We did. It's kind of like the drive in when you come off of Felicity onto our property. That road that goes straight to the RV park. That's the strip we did it on. We had about a 6-story scaffolding tower. We went down, went over the ramps. We had 30 cars lined from Henderson Ford, and they landed and went over a bag of hay. So I looked at it, I couldn't remember a lot how it all happened. It was a real pain behind to put that event together. I used some guys from Jazz Fest. We had the bleachers bleachers for 7,000 built in the parking lot, and he wound up winning the event with a combined footage of 200. So he had 3 jumps that each were 200. But he broke American record for the longest jump ever done. And that's Robbie Knievel right there with Casino back in the back. But that jump, he went 225 feet, which is like going from the end zone over midfield and landing at the 25-yard line. 225 feet. I mean, he was a nut. He drank the whole time. Matter of fact, he had like an 18-wheeler, a tour bus, all these bikes lined up right before the probably at 6 o'clock. 2 black cars pull up, and it's the IRS. He owed them like $250,000, and so they said, whatever money you get from this fight, this jump, is going to us. So he proceeded to get hammered and went through it anyway. But he didn't win, but he broke the record. Oh, then we used to do incredible Halloween stuff too. We just had a lot of fun back then. That was just a Halloween party, and we had a great budget. We had Mortis there, people in the Mortis, Tiny Tim, Boris Pickett, Monster Mash, and Eddie Munster. I mean, what kind of a Halloween party is that? That's like something from Hollywood. And that we probably had one of the Southeast's largest Halloween costume contests, like 5,000 first prize. That's me emceeing it back there, and. I'm a connoisseur. I've done so many Elvis impersonator contests. I mean, it's a good thing I love Elvis, but I did the very first one right here, and we probably had 20 contestants, and the last guy that comes out, really good-looking guy, he comes out, and halfway through him singing in front of the judges, his little 5-year-old son walks out with a matching suit. Well, anyway, the judges give it to him, and then the other Elvis impersonators go nuts on me. Well, yeah, but that was unfair. He got to bring a kid. And like this is several years later, decades later. But just show how ridiculous it was. That's me in orientation with a room full of Elvis. Don't do this. How crazy is that? Who would have ever thought? Now look at this, Moni. I'm never going to believe this. So this guy comes and calls me, and he says, "Hey, man, I'm from New Orleans, and I'm living in Waveland, and I have a movie of a video photographer guy. And anyway, it's the 50th anniversary of The Wizard of Oz, and Ted Turner commissioned a coffee table book, and the guy that did it, James Fricke, is an expert on The Wizard of Oz, and we wanted to do a documentary interviewing the last remaining Munchkins, one of them, and they did it at PBS's studios in New Orleans, over there on the bar. And so while they were in town, he said, we'd like to bring the Munchkins over to Casino. So they brought 8 of the Munchkins over there in that broadband book, and that is, look at this, how cool this is. Who would have ever thought, right? That's me and my children in the Lollipop Man. Is that not crazy? And then They were in town for about 3 days. We had the ruby slippers in our lobby in a glass case. And we just did this little VIP stuff and all that. And we had a Brenda Lee concert in our big tent, rocking around the Christmas tree. And so we told Brenda Lee, hey, listen, we have these munchkins here. Would you like to bring them on stage? And she said, well, that would be so incredible. So halfway through her show, she says, hey, everybody, the show sold out, 900 people. Have a special little surprise for you tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, turn all these little people walking, and she said, the munchkins from the Wizard of Oz. I mean, people started crying. And nobody took a picture of that. They don't have a picture. I have like the only picture with a munchkin right there. And it's the Lollipop Man. So after that, around that time frame is when I left Casino Magic, and I went to go work at the President Casino at the Broadwater for about 3 years. And during that time, they did a lot of country shows. They did Tim McGraw, Toby Keith, Martin McBride. They did some UFC fights. The UFC fights was now the big thing. And probably in 1998, I think it was that I came back to Casino Magic. By that time, they had gotten rid of the tent, and they had a barge in the back. And so one of the big acts, first acts we did this, and before was Jerry Lee Lewis. And it was kind of funny because Jerry Lewis, I said to him, his booking agent said, well, here's a number for his wife. That he's staying with his wife, he needs some stuff. And then when I met his tour manager, his personal manager, she goes, well, here's a number for his cousin. And so after I was calling, I it's the same number. You know? So after when I finally met his tour manager, I said, well, is it his wife or his cousin? He said, it's the same thing, he married his cousin. So Jerry was pretty old at the time. And as I say, one of the things he used to do is he used to go kick his chair when Great Balls of Fire. I've seen it by his manager's side of the stage when he's getting ready to do Great Balls of Fire. He kicks his chair, goes to kick it, and the guy pulls a string off stage and the stair flies off. He never could kick it. Oh, and then here's Fats Domino, man. What a great thing. And Fats Domino had retired, but back in my Superdome days, I worked with a guy, security guard, who was married to Fats's little sister. And this guy had a band, Reggie Hall, the Twilighters. And back then, in probably 1999, he was like, no, Dave, could you put my band in the lobby? We used to have a very popular lobby. Put my band in the lobby. Stage. Get the band in the lobby stage. And he wasn't that good. I said, I'll make a deal with you. I'll give you 5 weeks in the lobby in 1999 if you get me a weekend of Fats. Well, I don't know about that, David. Well, one day he calls and said, Fats is going to do it. So we did 2 shows of Fats, like the guys at the Bowl of Oz. How'd you get Fats Domino? Don't worry about it. But man, what a great show that was. Kenny Rogers. When I booked Kenny Rogers, he said, the only way I would book Kenny Rogers if I would take his son's band. I said, oh. So, okay, his son's band came. So his son's band comes, and his son's band is supposed to play 20 minutes. Well, after an hour went by, I said, get his son's band off the stage. We couldn't get his son's band off the stage. We finally did. And then BB King, man. BB King just did a wonderful show. You know, a typical BB King. And what was interesting about BB King, when the show was over in his dressing room, he would not leave until anybody that wanted to meet him would meet him. So he was there for about 3 hours meeting the security guards, housekeepers, everybody. I'm like, Mr. King, it's time to go home. So all right, well, then we started getting some of this really glamorous stuff. It was really fun. It was really fun, some of these acts. This went by the name the Golden Boys, and they were doing a casino show. What was fun about these kind of acts is these are also bona fide movie stars in Teen Hot Dog. So when they'd be on, we had big screens on the flank of the stage, so they would show clips from their, you know, Frankie Avalon, Jeanette Benucello, that's Frankie Avalon, Fabian, and Bobby Rydell. And that was a great, true Hollywood show. Debbie Reynolds, and I booked Debbie Reynolds several times. And Debbie Reynolds is a bona fide movie star, married to Mickey.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mickey. Yeah, and so my mother loved Debbie Reynolds, loved Carrie Fisher, her daughter, you know, from Star Wars. And I told Debbie Reynolds usually came for the weekend, Friday, Saturday. And I told her on Friday, I said, hey, Miss Reynolds, my mother's coming tomorrow, and she's one of your biggest fans. Oh, I'd love to meet your mom. She said, matter of fact, I'm having dinner before the show in the restaurant with some of my girlfriends from Biloxi. I'd like for your mom to join me.
Oh, nice.
Oh my God, I went and told my mom, I said, Mom, you want to have dinner with Debbie Reynolds? I mean, it was a highlight of her life. And how cool is that? I mean, I think that was really cool. Shirley Jones, Parker family. Suzanne Summers. And Suzanne Summers Suzanne Summers married. Oh, she was kind of messed up during those days on Three's Company, so she married a guy who was a TV actor, but he's also the spokesman for the largest grocery store chain in California. And so, and they were married until she passed. They were married for 40 years or whatever. Well, they flew in on their own jet to Stennis Space Center, and she did a cabaret show. So at about 2 o'clock, the doors open to the back of our entertainment complex, and here's this big good-looking guy with mirror sunglasses and beautiful Suzanne Summers. And I have a sound man I've known my whole life, Danny Griddle. He's from San Diego. He's got long stringy hair down here. Well, he looks at her husband and goes like with the hair, and he goes, "And don't forget to bring a friend." He's like, "Where'd you hear that?" Because all through the 70s and 80s, when he did his commercials for the grocery store, he pointed to the TV and yelled, "Don't forget to bring a friend." Yeah. He said, "How did you know that?" I said, "Man, from San Diego." Oh, so here's Pat Boone. And Pat Boone was something else. He had a great show. Forget about, until they show some of their clips and videos of what they did, you don't know how important they were. Here's him on the Beverly Hillbillies. And the part behind here is he was hitchhiking on the show. Jeffro picked him up. And he's had a guitar case. Hey, I'm Pat Boone. I ran out of gas. Of course, Ellie Mae falls in love with him. So they bring him to the mansion. Granny doesn't believe it. Granny says, "There's no way. Yeah, Pat Boone impersonator. Pat Boone impersonator." So he goes and gets his guitar and starts singing. Miss Drysdale was there. And sure enough, they know, hey, it is Pat Boone. So I already knew a story about Pat Boone's connection. Anybody know about Pat Boone's connection to Hancock County, this area? Okay, yeah. So back in the late 60s, some developers going to make a development as big as Diamond Head called Discovery Bay, back there on the back bay of Pascagoula. And they were selling lots for like $5,000, and a lot of retired people bought lots. While they were building the infrastructure, Camille hit. And the whole thing went belly up. Everybody lost their money. And there's their thing. But look at that right there. Pat Boone extends it per invitation. So before the concert started, our back barge, entertainment barge, looked over the back bay. I said, he was standing out there, "Hey, Mr. Boone." I said, "Guess what that is over there?" He goes, "Oh, what's that?" I said, "Discovery Bay." I said, "What?" He said, "Where am I?" I said, he said, what is that? I said, "It's past Louisiana." He said, "Where am I?" I said, "You're in Bay St. Louis, next door." He said, "Does anybody know?" I said, "Just me." Interesting story, huh? Yeah. Oh, Don Rickles. So I'm a big fan. A lot of people aren't a fan of Don Rickles, but I am. So about 20 minutes, he's in the dressing room. And Frank Sinatra's manager is his manager now. The stories that those guys had, they were basically part of the Rat Pack. About 20 minutes before his show, there's a knock on the door, open it up, and it's a Mexican housekeeper. And Don was like, no, not so, come in here. And sat the guy down, and for 10 minutes, I don't want to say berated him, but he warmed up for his show with the Mexican guy. You can only imagine what he's, Lou Rawls, book Lou Rawls. Lou Rawls was the spokesman for the national abuse of women. The week before the concert, he beat up his girlfriend. Billy Ray Cyrus. I said, "Well, we'll give it a shot." I mean, I didn't think it was going to do anything. Well, the minute we booked Billy Ray Cyrus, it sold out. Now, he was irrelevant, in my opinion. Like, how did he sell out? So, but he had fan clubs all over the place. So, about 4 days before the show, I get a call. I know that he was making a TV series in Canada, a country doctor. And they said, "Hey, man, bad news. Billy Ray's got to cancel on you. He's got to get back for filming in Canada Monday morning, so he can't do your show Sunday." I'm like, "Oh, man, but he'll make up day." Well, at least I don't have to work this weekend. So I'm sitting here Sunday, about 2 o'clock, TV's on the background. And what's the track, the NASCAR track in Nashville? Hey, the NASCAR track is on live on TV on ABC. And they, "Ladies and gentlemen, now for the national anthem of Billy Ray Cyrus." I said, "Oh my, I got duped." So anyway, he does come back a month later on his bus and all that. And I'm kind of turn around and look outside, and he's sitting out there on our dock's behind there with a little girl. And I said, "Man, I want to bring my camera because his show he was making was called Doc. I take a picture of Doc on a dock." Well, anyway, that turns out to be Miley Cyrus. Wow. It would have been a fun picture to have, but we didn't do it. Frank Sinatra Jr. And he did an incredible show. When I saw the show, I said, "God, he's as good as his dad." And his manager was I think it was Leslie Kaufman from New York. And they were really close to the Sinatra family. That's how they get into that. And she said, why has he been hidden so far? So because the dad loved Nancy and always picked on him. And you can't sing that because he sounded just like his dad. And the interesting thing about Leslie Kaufman, she said, hey, my daughter's in the movie business, television business. She just wrote a new TV series that's getting ready to come on. I said, well, what's it called? She goes, it's called Friends. So, well, I'll see if I'll pay attention to it. And sure enough, I put on Donnie Osmond. We often had shows come in, and they'd come and stay a week because we had a hotel, and they would get ready for their concert series. Anyway, he came in, and the only bad thing he did is we rented a grand piano, and he went and danced on top of it and scratched it all up. Ray Charles, he would rock like that, completely blind. When I met him, he got out the limo like that. And he was by the side of the stage like that. But once he got on stage, he just blew up. And I remember I went backstage looking for his manager, and I opened up the door, and Ray Charles is there, stark naked, with socks on, with the suspenders, and he's looking for the coat rack. James Brown. I did two weekends of James Brown. And the first time I did James Brown there, his manager called me up at about 10 o'clock in the morning on a Friday and says, hey, James Brown would like a steak. I said, let me see what I can do. Well, our steakhouse didn't open until 5 o'clock. And but they said, hey, we'll make accommodations for him. We'll bring our chef in and do it. I said, Chad, he can come in. Phone rings again. Listen, Mr. Brown wants you to have a steak with him at noon. Okay, so I go in there. I go in this room with James Brown and his entourage. The minute I walk in the door, now James Brown had not played a lot in 10 years, and all of a sudden he started booking some dates, casino dates mainly, but he was on commercials. He was on songs. He was everywhere you look. So I walk in there, and he said, when I walk in the door, I said, David Hilbert goes, James Brown. He said, let me tell you something. When I was your age, young, I knew I was destined for greatness. I was hungry. I knew I'd be great, but I needed help. I needed some partnership. And you knew what you told me? No. You told me no. Now, I'm old. I'm a millionaire. I'm successful. And now you want me? I got something to tell you. And he looked at me and said, F you. Oh my gosh. He said, come on, Mr. Hilbert, let's eat. We sat down and ate, and after that, he was like my big buddy. I think he released 50 years of tension on me, you know. But I originally went to Augusta, Georgia, which is a shrine to him. It's his hometown. Loretta Lynn, she was just as charming as she looks. Wonderful show. That was Bobby Vinton. Bobby Vinton was very, very close to Hank Strand. Remember Hank Strand, that old football coach in Kansas City? And Bobby Vinton wanted this special kind of wine that was like Boone's Farm. And it went over to the liquor store by Frugal's to get it. And, you know, when you go by those things, the further down the floor, the cheaper it gets. The one that he wanted was all the way down to the very bottom. The last one. And he had 4 bottles. And he and Hank Strand drank that. They were every bottle of it. Charlie Daniels, great show, great act. Glenn Campbell, great show. That's him. He was a king of Bacchus one time. Somebody bought him his Bacchus book. It's all about that. Randy Travis, great act, great show. Go-Go's, right? Like 3 weeks before the concert, we had Glenda Carlisle was the centerfold in Playboy. Wow. But it was a huge. They hadn't been together since 30 years, and every girl in town was there. Huey Lewis, Village People, Travis Tritt. I booked Travis Tritt. And then right the day before the show, his agent called me up and said, hey, listen, there's a little problem with Travis Tritt. He's going to do the show. But about 3 months ago, the FBI had a mob hitman on trial, and he was trying to cop a deal and said, listen, I'll tell you some other people I have a hit on if you reduce my jail time. Well, who else? So I have a hit on Travis Tritt. I said, what? For what? Apparently, he probably slept with somebody who was a mobster and put a hit out on him. So when he comes to the show, he's got 2 armed bodyguards, and he like that behind the door. Okay, clear you go. All the way to the stage and all the way on. But eventually got cleared of it. But if you Google it, it's like, wow, thanks a lot for that one. Rick Springfield towards the end of the show, he takes his guitar and hands it to a girl. Oh, just throw look at it. And then then kind of looking down at the crowd, she commotion, the manager's there saying, give me the guitar. And she takes it and runs and gets a policeman, BPD, and they had a big meeting. I don't know what happened, but she said, I'm not giving up this guitar. Hank Williams. Hank Williams was one of the most expensive acts I booked. He was like $100,000. And he was hardly ever going on tour, but he had a dove hunting trip. So he was going to Louisiana. So he booked 2 shows in Louisiana and 1 here. And at that time is when he was hanging out with Kid Rock and Pamela Anderson. And they were at his estate in Alabama. Now, Hank Williams, some of you know, he's got his own 727 that he flies. He's got a runway at his house. He flew into, I said, well, when the door of the plane opens, you're going to know if Kid Rock's with him or not. Well, Kid Rock and Pamela Anderson were not with him, but he landed at Stennis on a Sunday, like at 4 o'clock. And every single Hancock County sheriff car was there to meet him, if you can imagine. And so coming down 603 to Casino Magic was like 75 sheriff cars in our limousine when Hank did it. And he did a great, I tell you, he did a great show. And I think it's one of my last ones. Anybody here remember Chris Owens?
Yeah.
Okay, so Chris Owens always wanted to do a show at a casino on the Gold Coast, but everybody thought she was a stripper. Well, I knew said she wasn't. And so I reached out on a little limb. I'd set up the kind of a room for a cabaret style a couple times, and I booked Chris Owens. And she was so thankful to me that she asked me to come to her balcony at top for Mardi Gras, wherever I wanted. Took my daughter on the Easter parade, and she was my big buddy with her Mark, her common guy. So I booked Charlo, Coochie, right? So, and I get a call, hey, Chris wants to come see Charlo. So after the show, I bring Chris Owens backstage, and Charlo goes, Chris, oh my God, Chris, and tears are going down her eyes, and they hugged. So what happened was when Charlo was married to Xavier Cugat, the Cuban border, she was in Cuba, and Chris Owens and her husband back then, they ran in those kind of circles. So they were in Cuba in the late 50s. So Chris was at a big party and sees Charlo, at that time he was like 17, scared to death. And it was all these guys, cigars, all these mafioso guys. And Chris walks over and says, what is your name? Charlo. Come with me. And so she spent the weekend with Charlo in the mansion and told Charlo, taught Charlo how to conduct herself and be safe in those situations. So Charlo's like, she saved my life. Isn't that great? Isn't that incredible? And then, of course, here you go, the legend here. And we had booked Pete Fountain several times back at Casino Magic back in the day, and I knew him through some other things. And when he was getting ready to retire, this is probably in the 2002, I get a call from his manager son-in-law, hey, Pete's going to retire from the Hilton and all that. He lives right down the block, and he'd like to play a couple times a week. And so that's one of the last things I did at that casino was I put that together. And it was a great thing to do, a great thing to have, great for the thing here, and just a lot of fun, man. It has some great memories. And then here, you know, Katrina came. I was lucky enough to get back on at another casino. Of course, Casino Magic was no more. They turned it into a Hollywood, new ownership after that. And I got on with the opening team with the Silver Slipper. And I love this picture because when the Silver Slipper, their first week, the Sun Herald came and did a story on it. If the story said, so if you like trips to the end of the world, the Silver Slipper is a must-see. So for 20 years, I lived right there by Buccaneer Park. And there we go. So I think that is it. Was anybody? Okay. And that was it. I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun in those days. I thank Marlon for being. None of this would have happened would have been for Marlon. But I just owe that a lot. We had a lot of fun there together, and you know, life goes on. I retired from it all, and I got great memories. And I was fortunate because I didn't lose any of this stuff in Katrina. I have a man cave full of all these photos and posters and all that. Larry Holmes' boxes and trunks. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
Did you ever have a show that was not successful? I mean, you know.
Oh, I had. I mean, I pretty much by the time we started doing a lot of the entertainment, those acts were on the casino circuit. Because when Casino Magic opened up, there was only 3 states: Nevada, Lake City, Mississippi. They had casinos. Then it just
rapidly through the 90s intensified, where all these acts were coming out of the woodwork. Acts that were getting $2,500 because they were relevant were now getting 25 grand, like Baboon. They just go play casinos over and over and over and over again. I had a couple acts. I can't remember who we had. We had somebody like Deanne Warwick, somebody who canceled on us at the very last minute, got sick or whatever. And I had a pretty good relationship with Irma Thomas. And so there was no way we could call everybody. So I said, well, let's go get Irma Thomas. So I got Irma Thomas. So people came there. Irma Thomas was singing. They're like, oh, that's not terrible. It's not my problem. But that was the biggest thing. But other than that, I mean, I've always been pretty cautious on booking acts that don't come with baggage or issues, you know. But there were some that were bad personalities, but, you know. Yes?
How come they don't do it anymore?
It's very expensive to undertake, so they don't really do it that much more. And also, they're a lot of those older acts. They're kind of running out of that demographic. You know, going out to see those. You know, it's almost like I always had a lounge that I was over too, whether it was at the Broadwater or Silver's Up and all that. Just local variety bands. And now you look at websites. Now more and more bands are just getting a DJ because it's cheaper, and you only pay one guy. So that's probably part of it. And in the big picture of things, in my experience with entertainment on all levels, at the end of the day, at the end of the year, it was almost a wash. Some of you made money, some of you lost money. With most of these acts in the casino, 70, 80% was all given away to players anyway. So it just came, but it was an amenity, and everybody got to go backstage to get a picture with Engelbert Humperdinck or Paul Anka or Wayne Newton, whoever it might have been.
You ever get the Beach Boys?
What's that?
The Beach Boys?
No, I never did. No, I didn't get the Beach Boys. No, you know. No, you know, tell you some of the ones I got, when I got at the President Casino, I got, which was an interesting one, I booked Don McLean. And I had so many people that had a story about how American, Bye Bye Miss America touched their lives. I was talking to the bartender at Malini's before Katrina. He said, man, I wrote my college thesis on American Pie. It was one of the most important pieces of American literature ever done. And the funny thing about that song, they asked, he never told anybody what it means, but only one time we did an interview, he had said, I'm going to tell you tonight what that song means to me. At the end of the show, I'm going to tell you, at the end of the show, he said, that song means I never have to work again. So anyway, I had a lot more story behind that, but I got